So from young age, I was taught practice and discipline. The same with sports, it's discipline. Like if you skip your workouts, if you don't work out, you're gonna lose all the gains and benefits. So that's the difference between succeeding at something and not. So I think it translates between actually various disciplines, that one concept. So while you have to learn new things, but you know that you're gonna have to learn them and you have that discipline, it's not that hard. You just have to educate yourself on this way of doing business and generate your prospects, and then really deliver the story and how they can contribute to the bigger, greater goal. For example, our goal is to make massage and skincare services more available. And I think a lot of people already get those services regularly, but there's still not everyone, not enough people getting them regularly.
Yeah, and why is that like so important to just the health, wealth, fitness?
Because it's like I'm starting a new business, you know? And also the benefit of, let's say, people that trying to get into wellness business, would like be a wellness business owner, is that they will have direct access to me to train them. So that's something I could touch upon as a benefit of like working with emerging franchisor versus like, there's pros and cons to both, you know. There's pros to a long-standing older brand and then like a new brand too. But
yeah, let's start off diving into that topic, kind of unfiltered, diving into the podcast episode. Not sure what number this is, but we're just going to kind of spitball on today's episode. I think diving into, as an emerging brand here with Brilliant Massage and Skin, doing tremendous things. And you've also been at the IFE. You've been gone to numerous conventions at this point.
I think so. This was my third one. I've gone last year to the IFA in New York City, International Franchise Expo.
Yep.
And then I went to the one in Arizona, which we met as well there. And then this year it's four total. Then I went this year to New York the weekend before, again, International Expo. And then this weekend in Orlando here, there was the National Franchise Expo.
That's awesome. Do you want to touch a little bit going to the IFE this year compared to last year? What would you say the turnout was? I'm sure for all the people that missed out, was it a bigger turnout, smaller turnout? What are you seeing from people in person at these conventions compared to previous years?
So I did not exhibit as an emerging franchisor yet. I've gotten advice that I should wait to exhibit to these, especially the bigger ones. But what I've heard from people that were exhibiting, that the weather was really nice in New York City.
Okay, that's awesome.
And so I think Thursday was the busiest day, and then Friday, Saturday, I know that it was less busy.
Okay.
So some people were kind of like, not sure. They're not too happy. Yeah. Some people were happy. They got some good leads. I guess also depends how good each exhibitor is good at presenting and working those leads that do come in.
Yeah.
So it was mixed. It was mixed feedback, but I do know that they have some issue with promoter this year, that it wasn't like as much as they wanted, but that's only like a hearsay. But it's what you make of it too.
That's awesome.
Because some people said it was good and some people said it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But to me, it seems maybe it was a little less people than last year.
Were there any newer brands that you saw at the convention that you want to like highlight or point out that were like new, exciting, or anything?
For me, I went to the show to walk and educate myself more as a franchisor, as an micro emerging. There's even term micro emerging, because emerging is really 10 plus and micro is 0 to 10. So I wasn't so much focused on like learning other brands, even though I did see some new ones. There were some emerging ones that were showcasing that did not have any franchisees.
Okay.
Or had maybe one that was their friend, franchising. But I did found a good contact. I mostly went there for kind of learn more about broker options as well. Because as an emerging franchisor, I want to learn like where should we deploy our capital as we start our business? Like what's going to generate us the most leads with least upfront cost, because we don't have yet that cash flow coming from royalties.
Right.
So I'm trying to, not be wasteful, because it's, as a franchisor, it's very easy to just spend money. But it's important, what I learned is to really make sure your brand is really dialed in and not throw just money at the problem, but really making sure you got good story when you do get that lead, that you can close it. So I did talk to IFPG, showcaser there. Sunbelt Brokers was there, which they do like visa program as well.
Okay.
So that was good contact for me. That's actually a franchise deal. Sunbelt Brokers. They that person bought into that franchise, and now they're selling businesses and franchises. I did see another emerging spa franchise, and there was a new car coating franchise, which thought was interesting. So there was a mix, some emerging ones. There was still also some pretty like long-standing established ones. So like a mix of things.
I think that's a good point. Kind of going back to my joke about the painting companies, but it's so, there's so many independent businesses out there. I was just having a talk about the small business owner versus the entrepreneur and kind of the differences there, which I'd be curious about your feedback. But there's so many small businesses, but translating that to a franchise and exactly what you're going through is literally a race against time, money. Like you have all these resources, and responsible franchising becoming such a big kind of buzzword in the industry. It's not easy to grow a franchise. The only way is responsibly.
Yes.
Because you go through this process of validating. So to all these painting companies that have reached, that 10 unit, that 20 unit, that 100 unit mark, it says something very impressive about the systems, the infrastructure that they've built. And it's really interesting that you don't need to be like in your own niche. You can have other competitors. And as you go to all these conferences, they're all like sharing industry secrets, best practices. Like the franchising world is just such a small community. So like, that's why people in the same space, whether it's painting, flooring, they're all able to share success because they're not really fighting over customers. They're all have like different target markets. So there's like, the pie just gets bigger when we're sharing best practices.
Yes. Yeah, and I did meet like in Orlando show here another spa franchise. They're more like they do med spa as well. We don't do med, but they focus in Orlando area. So they have corporate in Orlando, and then they want to grow kind of in that sense. I believe more like Florida and maybe some south down here. But us, we want to grow in Northeast New England area, like Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Rhode Island kind of is our focus to start with. So, we are competitors, but we're different markets, and there's enough for everyone, because I won't be opening like in the area where he's opening, and vice versa, he won't be there. So we talked and we shared, our struggle as an emerging, how do we break through to obscurity while we're still like unknown at this point. Like, yes, we are known in our community, but not like in broad spectrum, not in other states. So
so I'm curious, as an emerging brand, taking really all the right steps to become one of those franchises that does reach that 10 unit, that 100 unit mark. And we'll have to do another podcast when we do reach
that would be
marks.
so interesting once
We'll be tracking the progress. So definitely like, share, comment, subscribe.
Keep me accountable on that.
Exactly. But I was going to ask, because you go to all these different conventions as an emerging brand, there's a lot of emerging brands that I talk to as a franchise broker, and they're not taking the proper steps, and they just want to kind of more focus on selling territories rather than going to all of these conventions, figuring out the proper steps to build that infrastructure. how important has that been for your business? Although maybe you might not be at that 10 unit mark, but you're taking the proper steps so that you can reach that mark and then continue to grow after that, which is super
That's
important.
such a good point, JD. I mean, and that's what a lot of good brokers understand and do, and want to work with. You want to work with the franchisor that really studies and knows
Right.
the industry, and not just going to sell crappy support, to mob business with not such a great support system to
Right.
the person that you go, because then you're almost responsible. You sold that brand, and then maybe they're not doing the best they could do, right? So I think it's very important. It's life changing. Like for me, I rather spend time to really educate myself and build a very strong foundation where I know the franchising business in and out, where I leave as little as possible blind spots. Because when the more blind spots you have, then you're doing something and you don't know you're doing it wrong. So also pursuing CFE has been really helpful. I'm almost completed. I still need some live credits. So hopefully maybe by the end of this year, if I go to some more IFA shows, I'll get those live education credits. But I recommend anyone, franchisees, franchisors, to go through that education process and go to the shows, talk to other people that franchisors or other franchisees.
And what have so you're going to all these events now. What was the first event you went to? Was it the IFE in New York last year?
Yes.
And what is it like as you're in a new emerging brand? What's it like talking to those well-established brands? Are they not trying to talk to you, or are they willing to talk to you? What's that dynamic relationship like if you are a newer emerging brand? Would you recommend talking to these well-established brands? Are they not really eager to talk to you guys, or what's that dynamic like?
So this is what I love franchising industry so much. And I know it's not really an industry, it's just a way of doing business. But I always had very warm welcome from people that even have very well established brands, all franchisors, or whether it's a vice president or people that work in the franchising business, salespeople, everyone, been very open and offering their experience, what things worked for them, what didn't work, what they think could help me. Everyone is very friendly, and I never experienced such a thing that they no, we're competitors, I won't talk to you, or because it's also a different industry, so we're not really competing. Because someone that wants to buy home improvement franchise probably won't be looking into wellness, massage and skincare, because there's a certain type of persona that's looking for a certain type of someone that wants food franchise. Maybe they don't want flooring franchise,
Yeah, and even just to stick on the painting example, even if they are interested in painting, they're willing to share secrets, because some people may be on the commercial aspect, some people
exactly.
just be residential. And even on top of that, everyone has kind of their ideal candidate that they're looking for. Some might be focused on a certain aspect of demographics, where some people may be on the other end of that. So that's why everyone's just so aligned on best practices, which I think is so fascinating. So as kind of a newer emerging brand, at what point was it where you started to consider franchising?
So when I went to our IFA show last year, I really didn't know anything about franchising, and that was my very first introduction ever, into dwelling, try to learn, is it even something I want to get into?
So what initially got you to go there? Were you just strolling by in the park, because you only lived a couple hours away in Vermont, or, did you practically know that there was an IFE, or how did you kind of come across this? Because for a lot of people, they see these events online, but they're not willing to make that investment to go there. So what got you to actually show up to the IFE and want to learn that day?
Well, I knew that I wanted to grow my business, and I just didn't know whether opening corporate locations be better, or another option is franchising, and there's also licensing and a couple other options. But so I Googled online, and it seemed like a lot of people were saying that, just from general Google search, just basic, that, yeah, just like franchising is usually faster way to scale a brand, and it has some pros to it, less cons, because you get other people's capital to help you scale that brand as well. Because that could be one obstacle for like a small local business to grow, because they might not have that capital to open all these locations. I mean, to franchise, it's also capital is important, like to do ads and get those leads and develop support for your franchisees. But it's more like you can scale that as you sell each unit. Like at first, yes, there'll be a front cost to develop like the FTD and manual, but that's kind of one-time thing, and then you can kind of sell. The benefit also, like for example, like if you could use brokers, is that you don't pay up front, you pay the broker once the contract is signed.
Right.
So that's not, there's no, loss there. If it's sold, it's great. If you don't sell it, you don't have to pay that. So that's one way to, so it's like, I feel like so then I looked at it, and then I Googled, what is there in the organization, and then IFA showed up, and that seemed like the biggest in US. So I decided, let me go check it out in person.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear your thoughts about kind of your decision-making process between franchising, licensing, like going like the private equity route. Like for me personally, I think what's so special about franchising is allowing other people to really pursue their dreams through business ownership. And you can somewhat do that through licensing, but licensing is like giving someone some tools with no system, no real playbook. It's kind of like, I've had a little bit of success. Now you're kind of like, they're more like selling their system than really awarding it. So it's really like you're in business by yourself, but you're going to have some tools. Where in franchising, you have these franchise business coaches, like people foot on the ground watching you to pursue your dreams. And it's really just like, if you have the mindset with Conquer the Mind, like you're going to be able to conquer anything with business ownership through franchising. It's really just a matter of finding the right opportunity that aligns with what you're looking for. But what was your thought-making process deciding between franchising, licensing, and maybe going the Wall Street route?
Yes, that's interesting. So I got some alerts. National weather, flash flood. By the way, I just drove like 4 hours from Orlando. Last 2 hours it was downpour rain, but I made it. And now we have some flooding. Okay, look, we'll be okay.
Yeah, that's Miami for you. Always distractions, but we're here live, organic content for you guys.
Exactly. So I think I always I've heard some horror stories about private equity for like the startup brands, where the one example, Brandon Dawson, that works with Grant Cardone, like he always says this example, how he got fired and kicked off from his own brand and was left with nothing, like when he took all this private equity investors. So that's always like scares me about private equity.
Yeah.
So that's why it's an option, and later on if once the franchise grows, then you might sell it to private equity, but then you sell it and exit, or you could stay on like a board of advisors. But I feel like you won't be kicked off by them, you will sell it to them, versus like they can't just like fire you. And it's so I don't know, I was a little scared to consider that route. Even though when I was at IFA, they did have some PE firms there, and I spoke to a couple of them, and they were interested in our concept. But So and then the licensing, I don't actually even fully understand it myself. I haven't done that much research into it, but the research that I did, it didn't seem like something like as good as the franchising. Like you said, it didn't seem like we would have as much maybe control over the way it operates, and it didn't seem like we could maintain maybe the same quality.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of thought about that route. So then franchising just seemed like the most effective, safe way to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say diving into like royalties, or not royalties is my answer, I guess, between licensing and franchising. It's just licensing is just that one-time upfront fee,
Right.
where franchising you're
That's-
collecting an
yeah.
ongoing royalty. So like licensing, they're going to give you some tools, but there's no like ongoing
Right,
support. So
yes.
it's really just what you make of it. And for anyone like that's considering licensing, franchising, definitely when you're talking to who's ever the developer, the brand developer, make sure you know whether it's a license model or a franchise model, because there's a lot of like license model that claim to be franchise models, or franchise model that claim to be license model, and you want to know exactly what you're getting into. Really, the key in anything, I think, is really just managing expectations, whether it's franchising or really just anything in life. So I think that is a really good point, and I think that's just really interesting diving into private equity, where you start to lose some control over your business, but in franchising, you're still losing some control over
Yes.
your business, kind of giving other people the name, the image, the likeness of your brand. What is that kind of like difference for you between private equity and then franchising, with kind of losing control as a founder, that you put your blood, sweat, and tears into building Brilliant Massage and Skin?
Well, when you are franchisor, if you don't work with private equity, you still decide all major decisions, the way where you want your franchise company to go and the way you want to do things. When you have private equity, they're going to have a say in it because they have money in it. And their, of course, main goal is always the profit, which sometimes might not align with the franchisor's vision, because sometimes you want to sacrifice the profit short term to have a bigger profit later. Like PE, it might not work like that for them because they need profit now for their investor returns. So even like Amazon, they operated, I believe, like first 10 years at a loss, right? Because they were reinvesting so much money back into it. They were operating at a loss. They were giving products at a loss just on board all these customers, with the free shipping and the lowest prices. And now they have large base of customers, but it took them. So if they had like PE telling them, hey, you can't be losing money this many years in a row, like we need this investment back, maybe they wouldn't grow as big. So it's a different type of control loss. Like when you have franchisees, yes, you lose like that day-to-day operation, each location, the franchisee is responsible. But you could like discipline that franchisee, and you could even not renew them. So it's a different type of loss of control, but I feel like you're still more in control than if you had to also answer now to this investor.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting once you start to get private equity involved, and it definitely kind of goes both ways, because when you're investing into a franchise, you're investing into those additional resources, the support, and who can give you more support and resources than private equity and Wall Street. So there's a nice balance between franchising, private equity, and that's kind of what we've seen over the last couple of years, really just the intersection between private equity and franchising, which I think is really interesting. One point that I really like that you just brought up with the Jeff Bezos and Amazon, literally 10 years at a loss, reinvesting into their business, because when we talk about the small business owner versus the entrepreneur, I think one of the big differences is the small business owner. When we talk about franchising, you can very easily replace your income with a single unit.
Yeah.
And that's really what I look at as the small business owner. You're replacing that income, but the entrepreneur is going for that second, that third unit, whether it's the same brand, different brand, they're looking for different ways to kind of innovate. And I think the entrepreneur, they're someone that's looking to find ways to reinvest back into the business, whereas the small business owner is looking for the quickest way to collect profit. And this entrepreneur, as they're going through that journey, they're probably spending like the first 2-3 years, especially in franchising. A lot of successful franchisees, the first 2-3 years are just reinvesting into the business so that they can 10x their expectations and become the top performer and get to that second, third unit, which is really where those generational wealth opportunities are created. And those are like the very, very special moments where you truly are living life on your own terms and you have this real asset to hand down to your kids or really sell at the end and really just have control over your life, whether it's financially, lifestyle, and just living life on your own terms. I think it's really important. I'd be curious, as we're diving into the small business owner versus entrepreneur, what are kind of your thoughts between the main differences? Just because I had one of my mentors, Mark Holloway, who was just on the podcast, text me asking what I thought about the small business owner and the entrepreneur. So I wanted to get your thoughts as someone that really is an entrepreneur. And the other point that I wanted to add, I think one of the big differences between small business owner and entrepreneur, I think an entrepreneur is someone that really inspires and motivates other people to be business owners, whether it's a small business owner or another entrepreneur. When you look at, Grant Cardone, when you're going to that conference, Mark was saying that like a entrepreneur is someone that can like walk away from the business. But with 10X and Grant Cardone, he really is the business. But so I mean, if he walked away, they'd still be successful. With Brandon Dawson, they got a great crew. But like I look at Grant Cardone as 10X. So
the face of 10X.
If he walks away, they're going to slowly lose some profit, you would think. So the entrepreneur is not necessarily the person that can kind of walk away. But I would still look at like Grant Cardone. Same thing with Elon Musk. Like people invest in Tesla because of Elon Musk. So is the entrepreneur necessarily someone that can walk away from their business, or what is the difference between the small business owner and an entrepreneur like yourself?
Well, small business owners, they're also entrepreneurs. They took that leap to leave their safe 9 to 5, so to speak, But what I see the difference with like entrepreneurs that take it further versus staying just like a 1-2 unit small business operation is that these people have a bigger calling. They want to serve more people. They want to do bigger things. They want to grow personally, because it's really not almost like not the money. It's who you become while you're pursuing that goal, like personal growth, education, meeting people along the way, helping people along the way. These people that want something more than just a paycheck, I think that's the difference for me, at least. Like sometimes local small business people get stagnant or they don't grow any further because maybe they're having their, lifestyle that they're happy with, their family, they want to spend more, they have different maybe priorities or small kids that they need to take care of. And it's okay, for different people, different priorities. But I think the difference is the entrepreneurs that do make like big change in the world is the ones that are not content with just like collecting that small paycheck, or it could be like a decent paycheck, but
Yeah, and definitely want to give a shout out to like all the small business owners out there. Like the country literally like runs on small business owners. Like they put their blood, sweat, and tears. Like they're inspiring, motivating the people in their local community. And like literally, if everyone was just providing like that local business, that small business owner, like that brings like communities together, and like they're doing like God's work, honestly. Like really with all the things they do, whether it's a painting company, like everyone's house relies on these small business owners building houses. Like it's all these things that are just small
very
business owners
needed
that come together.
Yeah, they're very important. They're very needed, and they usually really deliver high value and high service because they, they're into day-to-day operation. They know they know their business like their 5 fingers. They just really in it and proud of it. And but the difference, like I guess your question was that for me, some people are happy doing that and some people are not.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of synergies between the two, and really the biggest thing I think is just people that want to have an impact, whether it is on their local community or at a bigger scale. I think just people that want to have that impact, because when you look at corporate America, I've been in corporate America for a couple of years, and the first couple months you feel like you're making a difference, you're having some impact, but you're really only having like a certain impact, in my opinion. I feel like when you're a business owner, like you're really providing that impact not only to your community but also to your family. Like I remember my father, when he first invested into a dry cleaning franchise, like that was when like our family dynamic changed. Like he was watching me grow up, going to all my sports games. Like that's really like the power of a small business owner. Like it sounds cliche, like this idea of taking control of your future, but that's really what franchising is. And that's why when you're in franchising, people say take control of your future, because they lived and breathed and they really know what it means. So I think it really does have this idea of taking control of your future, but it's definitely not an easy path. It's not for everyone. I think that's what's so cool about franchising, and there's so much competition nowadays. Like it's not easy to grow a franchise. It takes like building the infrastructure, the support, the resources, and like anyone interested. Like there's so much regulations nowadays where you really go through a process. Even after speaking to a franchise, like legally, you have to wait another like 14 days to sign any contract. And,
well, 16 actually. I think it's recommended in some states, right?
Yeah. And like regardless whether it's like 14 days, it typically ends up being like a 2 to 3 month process, because like most people want to get all the necessary and accurate information. It really is like
it's a life-changing decision. It's a life-changing decisions. But it's a right place, right time. People need that change. And buying into franchise, becoming entrepreneur, business owner, opening one unit, maybe then more units, becoming leader in your community. It's a life-changing event.
Yeah, and the other point I want to bring up too with like the small business owner, I remember I worked at a dry cleaning franchise growing up, and it wasn't my father's. There was another local community guy that actually had a corporate 9 to 5 and did this as a diversification method, and I kind of managed it. But for me, like being able to employ other people, like it taught me a true sense about business ownership at a young age, and it really inspired me to a position where I am today, where I knew I didn't want to go that corporate America route and I wanted to be a business owner. So like being able to really inspire and motivate people, and like you can put so much words to it, but like what it really does for people in that community is like really powerful, whether it's a small business owner, the entrepreneur, and I honestly think they're probably one and the same, honestly. But I think it's just really powerful between franchising and really what's happening in franchising over the years.
Yes, and I do know that it's more difficult now for emerging brands to so to speak, blow up, as it was like 10 years ago or even before that. But if there is good concepts, good industry, and good support system for the franchisees, it's definitely possible. You just have to educate yourself on this way of doing business and generate your prospects, and then really deliver the story and how they can contribute to the bigger, greater goal. For example, our goal is to make massage and skincare services more available. And I think a lot of people already get those services regularly, but there's still not enough people getting them regularly.
Yeah, why is that like so important to just the health, wealth, fitness? I know even before becoming like the CEO, I think you have like your NASM certification, you're a licensed personal trainer. Like how did you, I know previous episode you talked about being a musician. What was that transition from musician to health and wellness, and then creating what you have today?
Yeah, so we touched on it last time, and it's a creative process. So, music, anything, if you want to do well, it requires discipline. And that's, once you learn that, so doing music and being a musician taught me how, you have to practice 4 hours a day to become good, playing piano, for example. So I've done that all throughout years, more than 10 years, like throughout high school and then beyond. So from young age, I was taught practice and discipline. The same with sports, it's discipline. Like if you skip your workouts, if you don't work out, you're gonna lose all the gains and benefits. You won't lose them overnight, but you won't accomplish the physique or the goal that you're looking for, or your cardio performance, oxygen intake, VO2 max, you won't achieve those things. So that's the difference between succeeding at something and not. So I think it translates between actually various disciplines, that one concept. So while you have to learn new things, but you know that you're going to have to learn them and you have that discipline, it's not that hard.
So for someone out there, with the podcast, one of the goals is tell people that young college, like myself a couple of years ago, no idea what they want to do. Like it can be pretty scary entering the workforce. It's harder than ever nowadays, especially there's a lot of economic uncertainty. And then there's people in corporate America, 40s, 50s, 60s, still struggling to really figure out what their true purpose is. And as you're alluding to, discipline seems to be one of the main keys to success. How did you develop discipline in your life, and how does someone listening potentially develop discipline in their life? Is it something you were genetically born with, or you kind of developed over time?
That's a very good question. I don't know. That's such a good question.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
Yes. Now I'm curious to look into research on genetics on discipline. I think there's something has to do with it because, have you seen that marshmallow test with kids when they
from like the 60s or 70s or something?
I don't know which decade, but like
it's not a new study though. It was from like a
while ago.
Right?
Yeah. So they put like a marshmallow, and then whichever kid waits to eat it, they gets like a second one. About. Yeah. So that probably does have something to do with the personality too, because unless these kids were taught already by that young age by their parents, or did that come inherently from who they are, right? That's interesting.
Yeah, do you want to explain the marshmallow experiment for the people? Do you remember it?
Well, so they put marshmallow in front of the kid in separate rooms, and then they told them to not eat it because they'll be back 10 minutes later with two marshmallows.
If they didn't eat the one.
If they didn't eat the one. So some kids were like trying to distract themselves. They were like, twirling their tongues, like doing everything. Some were like touching it. Some of them were like smelling it, trying not to eat it. Some did eat it and some didn't. So those that didn't eat, they followed up with them, I believe, what was it, like 20 years later?
Yeah.
They were actually more successful. So discipline, maybe that is, I don't know if that came already the way their parents disciplined them from young age, or did that came from their inherent personality, the way they were born that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it could be learned, like through doing fitness can teach you discipline.
Yeah.
Some people have hard time with it at first, or like diet, some people have hard time following. But you gotta start like small, like running half a mile week 1, then maybe closer to a mile week 2, 3, and 4, then 1.5. So then you kind of build up that callus in your mind and in your body gets stronger over time. Or like playing an instrument, I think can teach discipline. But as far as I remember, I always kind of been pretty disciplined person. So I don't know. It's hard to say. But I think you can train with different tools.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I'm trying to even reflect myself. But on the marshmallow experiment, which I think is really interesting, because you would say, oh, they're little kids. They just want to eat the marshmallow. And the experiment, they didn't like the people that ended up eating the marshmallow. they weren't in the room and they ate the marshmallow right away because they were just the kids. They're like, all right, screw it, I don't really care.
Yeah.
They waited like 4 or 5 minutes, and then they were like, all right, I can't wait another 5 minutes for the second marshmallow. So it was a true like discipline test, in my opinion. And then, as you alluded to later, I think they did a test like 10, 20, or 30 years later, and all those people were like 10x more successful. And by success, it was like, you know, their lifestyle, financially, family, health, like everything, like all like the health, wealth, wellness, everything was on track.
Yes.
In that like small percentage of people, and I think it was like less than 30% of those kids made it the 10 minutes to get the second marshmallow. It might have been even less than that, but it was pretty dramatic, and it is interesting how they are at such a young age, and it does make you think how much genetics plays into it versus how much just being in the environment and kind of surrounded by it. And I think it's always like a little bit of both. But I think
maybe post in the comments down below, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that'd be a really good topic, just diving into discipline, whether it's genetic or your environment. But regardless, I think there's no excuses in life. I think it really comes down to, with the podcast, Conquer the Mind. Like, if you're not conscious in your life, you're never going to be disciplined in your life. So it really comes down to like each day, like how conscious are you? And for me, I like, even people that grow up with a lot of privilege, they still don't have like that true sense of taking control of their future. So there is some sense of like comfort level where they're still not disciplined. So there is some genetics, but I think a lot of it might be more just the environment. And I think for a lot of people, like whether it's hitting a rock bottom moment, where I see from a lot of people I look up to.
Or, I mean, I've almost been there.
I think we all have. And I think just like whether it's hitting rock bottom or having a lack of opportunities, I've learned from just talking to a lot of successful people on the podcast, seem to be two of the parallels between the people that take control of their future, live life consciously. And it's not a matter of genetics or necessarily their environment, but reaching a point where there's no options, or like there's a point of no return, honestly, for a lot of people. So I think it's just interesting that for a lot of us, we have to reach these negative points to reach these 10x success points. Whereas if you don't really reach those real negative points, and I'm super grateful for those negative points, because I could have very easily been in a corporate America job, making 6 figures at a pretty young age and working online, really living in Miami, like pretty much living a pretty great life. Like you don't really have to put yourself through the life of a business owner and entrepreneur. But when you reach that point, I feel like there's no going back. Like there's no regrets to a certain point.
Well, I mean, I had a little bit similar moment, you know. My parents did pass away, and I just I could have just kind of stayed in my father's business and continued, you know, just kind of living and doing what he did. But, you know, I wanted a challenge. I wanted to make something of my own, of myself. And I chose like a harder path. I moved to another country, you know, because I wanted to accomplish something different. But it's interesting how people, when they're in a good, soft circumstance, how they can get comfortable, or their parents overprotect them. Sometimes I worry about those people, because then they don't fulfill their potential. So there is actually a bird. I think maybe it's an eagle. I'm not sure which bird it is, but when they have little birds in their nest, when the birds started to grow up, they started to take away the soft parts of the nest. And then because they want the birds to start flying and leave the nest. So then they keep taking until only like these uncomfortable, sharp things are left from the nest. And then the birds have no choice but get up and fly. So, you know, to be not soft, sometimes we need a little difficulty in our life that creates personal growth. So my question as an emerging franchisor, I have a question for you as a broker. What exactly do you do in the relationship between people that are looking to buy a business, get into certain brand, and then franchisors who are looking for those people that are interested in their
Yeah, so kind of two parts. First, the candidates that are interested, and then two, like the businesses that are interested. So candidates that are interested, basically there's a bunch of broker networks in franchising. They all kind of do relatively the same thing. They represent somewhere between like 300 to like 700 plus brands. Some more willing to work with emerging brands like yourself, and some need to see like that 5-10 year track record, if you will. So basically each one of those broker networks all kind of does the same due diligence process, going through, the financials that everyone's concerned about, speaking to other franchise owners, talking to the CEO, the corporate team, the leadership. So really doing a full due diligence process as any potential candidate would of each franchise to really figure out what those top opportunities are in a range of industries, categories like automotive, beauty salon, spa, real estate, laundry, flooring, home services,
Painting.
brick and mortar, painting. Literally like anything you can think of is probably a franchise. Like 1 in 8 small businesses at this point is a franchise model. Franchising is really just a collective union of small business owners without the union part. But basically you do the due diligence. You can do basically, if you're interested, there's 3 kind of stages. You could do Google research, you could go straight to a franchise developer, or you could talk to a broker like myself. Basically, you can do the Google research yourself.
Right.
It's kind of like pay to play, if you will, in terms of all like the top opportunities, the best, low investment, whatever it may be. A lot of that's kind of like pay to play, so it can be kind of biased if you go the Google route. You could take the second route, going straight to a franchise developer, and their role, they typically represent one brand, and their job is to sell you that brand. That's kind of how they make a living. There's nothing wrong with that. Most of them have a really close tie to that brand,
Right.
whether they own it themselves, their family does, or they have some close connection to that brand. They're all very passionate about what they do. So really the key for anyone interested is that when you are going through the process, if you think anyone's trying to sell you anything, literally run away. Like that's a major red flag. Like as you're getting involved in franchising, like no, everyone's warm, friendly. Like we're a community of people. As we talked about competitors sharing secrets, like there's really like best practices between competitors. Like if you feel like you're being sold at any point, whether it's a broker or a franchise developer,
anything pushy like turns me off personally, but it's also can be a red flag that they are being, nobody's interested maybe, and they're just so desperate. That's not a good sign.
Yeah, and really like the key as we're talking about getting to that 10 unit, that 100 unit mark, if you don't have happy franchise owners, you cannot reach that 100 unit mark. You might be able to reach the 5 and 10 unit mark, but you will not be able to reach that 50, 100 mark. Everyone that's interested gets to speak to other franchise owners. So if those other franchise owners aren't happy, you're not going to be able to grow. So I think that's a really key point. And so kind of the third point is going to the broker who, as we alluded to earlier, they go through all the different opportunities, kind of figure out what the best of the best is, if you will. And that's where I kind of joke, like my role as a broker, it's not to ever sell you anything. It's more like you're kind of a real estate agent, but
it's a service.
Right, except rather than kind of dealing with houses, we're dealing with businesses.
Yes.
So like we'll figure out financially what you're capable of. If you have $20,000 in the bank, we're not going to go show you, a penthouse in Miami, for example. We're going to show you what financially makes sense. And it doesn't mean you need to live in a penthouse in Miami to be happy. There's literally happy options at all these different levels, if you will. So we'll figure out financially what we can do to best set you up for success. And then step 2 is figure out what they actually like to do, their strengths, their weaknesses, their passions. Really what's cool about franchise is that you can leverage your current skill set, whether it's corporate America, you're a musician, you're a fitness trainer, you can leverage all those skills towards a business. So there really is a business for anyone, depending upon what your passions are, what your strengths are. Also being aware of what your weaknesses are very important too. So that's where a broker's role comes in, to figure out what all those things are, and then we can figure out what the top opportunities are that best align what you're looking for. Is really the best advice for anyone. Like speak to a different developer, speak to a couple different brokers, really see who best aligns with your goals for the future, because just like any industry, there's good apples and there's bad apples.
Right.
So you want to make sure you're dealing with someone that's actually well respected in that community, in that industry, and really is an expert. So really, those are kind of the three different paths that you can initially take. But once you get started, there really is a step-by-step process. So I could probably go on and on and on, but yeah, there really will be a step-by-step process. But just to quickly summarize it for anyone that is looking into franchising, like you're going to get an FDD, a franchise disclosure document, that's going to give you all the financials of other franchise owners. You can really form what's called like a unit economics and really see what those potential financials could potentially look like.
And like certain territory, it will also depend like territories.
Yeah, great point.
Like you might buy one or two. The franchise fee will depend on that. So I think as a broker, you can really kind of educate people, especially that are new looking into buying business, maybe don't have even much prior buying business experience. It's like someone that's buying a house for the first time. They really need that hand holding and advice. Like, okay, which house is gonna work best for you? Is this the area that you want to be in? Do you like the color? Do you like the bells and whistles that come with it? Do you want to go more like bare walls and like not as much bells and whistles and maybe pay less,
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's really helpful for someone that, is looking to, but it's because it can be a very scary process.
Yeah, like I say to everyone, like your life's going to change, not only financially, but your lifestyle is going to change. So really the goal, like I said earlier, is managing expectations. So especially in franchising, your life's going to change whether you are already a business owner, especially if you're not a business owner, but even if you are a business owner, like your life's going to change through franchising. So our goal is to guide you through this process so that you can really manage those expectations of understanding what your life could look like in that 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, like 30 year time frame. Like you're going to get to speak to all these different franchise owners in the system and really see what their day in life was like and ask some of those tougher questions from someone that's made the exact same investment that you have, which I think is really key because, brokers, franchise developers, their life is really kind of made upon awarding more franchises. So obviously you'll take them through a process and make sure that it is a good opportunity, but the opportunity to speak to someone that's not trying to sell you anything, that has nothing on the line, has made that same investment before, can really tell you what that day in the life is like, I think is very powerful for someone that's interested in franchising.
Yes, and then, also it can answer questions like, okay, am I buying, like, is this opportunity like I'm just buying a job for myself? Do I buy like potential for growth for more units, multi-operation, multi-area, multi-state, like those? Because then looking into like numbers just with an FTD, like without a broker, sometimes it can, if someone just first time, they might not know. Because for example, like for us, the income for our franchisees really gonna depend on how many treatment rooms they want to have and what demographic, like how rural or not rural their town population wise is. So explaining, this is what our FTD is, and this is how many treatment rooms we have in this town, this area. But if you're in this other town, you could have double size the rooms, so your revenue will be double that,
Yeah.
So I think it's for someone that's looking, it's good to have that hand holding, right?
Yeah, I think it goes back to your point about location and the territory. It really is a step-by-step process. All these candidates, a lot of times they're trying to do all their own research, and I kind of say to everyone, like, I don't want you staying up late at night trying to answer all these questions. I have this tailored process in place that will guide you each step of the way. So when you're trying to figure out the territory, one of the biggest questions I hear is, will it set me up for success? How big are the territories? Are there people nearby that are going to take over my territory? And the only way to get that answer is speaking to developers like yourself, going through the process and really seeing, how do you map out your territory? Is it by zip code? Is it by number of females in that area? Is it by number of households? Like there's so many different ways, and each franchise does it differently. And it's not all explained online. Then you talk about owner operator, executive model, whether you want to be doing the labor in your business, or kind of hiring a team and managing them and focusing more on the sales marketing aspect? Like, these aren't questions that you can really find just based upon a Google search.
Yeah.
And if you want to go the path of speaking to franchise developers, just like houses, there's hundreds, thousands of opportunities out there. You know, you'd be spending a ton of time, and we know everyone already has life's responsibilities. You know, they're 9 to 5 probably already, family. So there's a lot of different things in the way. So if you want to try to manage a franchise search on yourself, you know,
it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. There's a lot thrown at you. You don't really know what's real, what's not real. There's a lot of headlines out there, and then so just trying to figure out what's real, save you a ton of time in the process. And at the end, franchising business ownership is not the path for everyone, but we'll take them through that process to really see what makes sense for them, whether they want to start their own consulting company, invest in real estate, continue their 9 to 5, or, you know, build an empire through franchising.
Right. Well, thank you for shining a light on that. And thanks for everyone tuning in. And thank you for having me here in Miami. We did our podcast here on the fly, and it was big storm, seems like, in Miami the past couple of days, but I managed to get here and we had great conversations.
Yeah, shout out to Jolita making the 4-hour drive from Orlando, and I wish we could have shown the background a little bit, but it's pouring, thunder, lightning struck a couple times. The condo here is flooding, the AC stopped working. Like, we've dealt with a lot of obstacles, but I think it's a great point in life. Like, not everything's perfect, but we still hit record on the camera. We made it happen, and it really goes back to the discipline and having success. Like,
don't give up no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you made it to the end of the video, definitely like, share, comment, subscribe. Talk about our topic about small business owners and entrepreneurs. Very curious about your thoughts there. Then the whole idea of how much genetics versus your environment, and really just taking control of your future, and how much these different factors play into your life. But overall, I think we had a really great conversation today, Jolita. You know, if you're interested in Brilliant Massage and Skin, definitely shoot me a message. We can provide those introductions and kind of take you through the step-by-step process that we're talking about, and see, you know, do you want to be a business owner, or do you want to add to your portfolio? And we're here. I hope you found this video valuable.
Join our wellness growing family, Brilliant family.
Check us out.
Have a brilliant day.